Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jim Morris. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of Regional Water Organizations. I want to welcome you to our session. It will be a political update and the impacts on the water and wastewater industry. Our speaker is Brent Fewell. Brent will be just joining us here real soon. They're working on some technical issues with Brent, so comes on, we'll do a brief introduction and let Brent start a discussion, and then we'll also have times for questions and answers as we have with the other sessions as we get going. Hey, Brent.
Sorry about that. That's what you get with live TV.
That's right. We knock on wood, we've had really good luck, yesterday and so far today. So as far as I know, that's the first kind of little glitch we've had. So we've been extremely lucky, and I make that because Astrid and the team has done such good advanced work. So welcome. I was just giving a little overview on our session, and so I'll do a brief kind of introduction for you, and then we can open it up. So Brent Fewell is the founder of Earth and Water Group. Brent has been in public policy advocacy and environmental law for over 25 years. He's spent time as an environmental lawyer, corporate executive, and also a senior U.S. EPA official in the recent past as well, in the Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations branch. So Brent has a wealth of knowledge. I think last time I looked, you have offices in 3 other communities across the country now in DC. So there's 4 of you. So Brent is highly regarded thought leader on environmental policy and governance matters. He's a hard worker and has a wealth of experience, as well as degrees from University of Maine, master's in environmental management from Duke, and his law degree as well, and has licensed to practice in Pennsylvania and DC. So Brent, we'll open it up to you. I just wanted, as an opening kind of comment, know that I've gone through some administration changes while I was in DC as well. And so it's really kind of a unsettling time in DC, especially in the agencies from the administrative level. And, you're going to have people that are going to be opening those letters that are in their desk, as we used to say, and writing the letter for the next person.
That's right.
So there's a sea of change that looks like it's on the horizon, and with that, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll jump when you're ready.
Thanks, Jim, and it's great to be with you and your members at ARWO, and thank you to Astrid and Emily. I hate to be the first one who jinxes you all on the technology, but leave it to me. So that's my Midas touch. So great to see a lot of friends in the audience today. It's lots going on, as you said, Jim, in DC. There is, as you all know, there is obviously a transition and process, and it's unsettling time. So what I thought I would do is spend some time talking to folks, and looking forward to some Q&A. We'll keep the slide. But what I thought I'd do is just talk to you about what we could anticipate in a Biden administration, some of the priorities, some of the officials whose names are being kicked around as possibly cabinet members and sub-cabinet members, and kind of what the future might hold for water utilities, and particularly ARWO members. So first of all, as we know, President-elect Biden focused on a number of environmental issues. 2 top priorities were obviously climate change and climate policy, and also environmental justice. It's fair to say that the incoming administration will be spending a lot of time. I've talked to a number of colleagues that are on the Biden team, that will be on the landing team. So there's the transition team, and then there's specific members from the transition team that will, they call it the landing team, those that will actually go to the agencies and begin the transition process. So there are a number of familiar faces that many of you all know, and ones that I have worked with in the past. Many former Obama administration within EPA. There are some familiar names. Some of you all might remember Cynthia Giles, who was the head of the enforcement office. Cynthia is working closely also with Ken Kaposis. Ken was a longtime Hill staffer and House T&I for many years, and then was at the agency in the Office of Water, where he was nominated to be the assistant administrator for the Office of Water, but was never confirmed. So those are, and then you have a couple of others. Brendan Mallory, who's a very thoughtful lawyer, was in Office of General Counsel while I was there, a career staffer who's extremely thoughtful. She's also helping the team along with Joe Goffman, who basically helped the Obama administration at EPA. He took the lead on climate change policy. As you can imagine, climate change is that giant sucking sound. It's going to be the obviously the focus of the administration. In fact, coming into the last few months, there have been a number of policy papers that have been issued. There was 39 agency review teams, 19 of whom have climate experts and background. So there's going to be a really heavy focus on climate. In fact, if anyone's interested in reading them, there are actually 11 government agency reports that have been prepared by the transition team under the umbrella of Climate 21, from DOI to USDA to EPA to OMB, where the focus is going to be on climate change. And as we can expect, there's going to be a focus right now on rollbacks of the Trump rollbacks. That's a big focus right now of many kind of the inside baseball. Many of the transition team members are looking at all the programs that were rolled back during this past administration, and to decide and figure out, first of all, which ones can be reinstated, and what legal and policy barriers may impede the reinstatement of those programs. As you can appreciate as well, there was a fair amount of attrition of scientists from EPA in this administration. Close to 500 scientists left or were some were terminated. And so there will be a big focus on probably reinstating and hiring scientists to focus on things like climate. Infrastructure, the good news is infrastructure is going to be a high priority as well. Everything is going to be climate with this administration, I predict, and those things that kind of support and flow from climate policy, like resilience, sustainability, will support that agenda. So water infrastructure resiliency will be a important topic. I would also say infrastructure. There's going to be a big focus on some of the failing systems. As we know, COVID has had a huge impact upon a lot of utilities, and I'm sure a number of your members have felt that. The economic impacts, as some of you may have seen ARWO's report earlier this year that projected losses of $14 billion in water utilities by 2021 from the loss of revenue and increased operational costs associated with the pandemic. And then NACWA also put out a report where they were projecting close to $17 billion in losses due to the pandemic. So utilities are obviously very concerned. I think a fair number, most utilities will be able to survive this. Some may not, but the new Congress will be focused on a stimulus package and trying to help prop up those utilities that may be struggling right now. At least that will be a focus. The question is how much money in a stimulus. We know that President-elect Biden wants to have something pretty quickly. We might get something actually in this administration before the end of the year, but we would expect also a Biden administration to likely have more in coming into next year. But the big question really is Georgia right now. Is we all know there's a couple of races down there, and that will affect and influence the shape of the Senate and who controls the Senate, and that's obviously critical for Biden's nominees, cabinet members. Had some conversations with a couple of professionals who are actually being considered cabinet member in the next administration, and really there's the focus is and kind of the internal struggle within the Biden administration right now is really, which candidates will those be? Will those be more left progressive candidates, or will they be more centrist toward sort of the Biden centrist? I think a lot of it will come down to which candidates are confirmable. And so there's going to be a lot of give and take and a lot of discussions behind the scenes on which candidates will be able to get across the line on confirmation. So there will be also a big focus probably on small utilities. As we know, COVID has impacted a lot of the smaller utilities, even more significantly than the larger ones. I think we can also predict and expect more regulations with this administration. Obviously, it's the administration coming in has it wouldn't surprise anybody. Obviously, they feel that the Trump administration has rolled back too many regulations, and so it wouldn't surprise anybody if we see more regulation focused on things like even lead. We've had a major rewrite of the lead and copper rule, and there's going to be a big focus on actually removing and replacing lead pipes. PFOS, PFOA, and PFOS contamination and impacts in drinking water. That's going to also take front and center. So that will also likely impact smaller systems. As we know, most communities around the U.S. have fire departments and training areas and small airports where PFOS were used. And so there's not the concern is, I think, from a lot of small communities, is that these additional cost of treatment, water treatment, is going to impose even more cost than what currently utilities are having to bear, and that could really have an impact on survivability of some of these utilities. Let me see. A couple of other. I think USDA, Jim. I don't know if you guys have talked about USDA. Robert Bonney is obviously a candidate whose name is being kicked around. He's on the transition team and helping there, and Robert is someone that many of your members may know from USDA. And Robert has been at Duke since he left the Obama administration, and actually he put out a very what I thought was a very thoughtful report on rural attitudes towards the environment and discussion about how we might be able to work with.
Well, Astrid, it looks like we lost Brent.
Yes, it does. It does show that he's still on, so I'm going to give him a quick call.
Okay.
So sorry about that. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to start sending those in.
Yeah, Brent was talking about the USDA, and for those of you that have interest in who's on the transition teams, you can go to the President-elect's website, and they've got a list of all the transition teams for each individual agency. So in addition to the individual that Brent mentioned, many of you will remember that towards the end of the Obama administration, John Padalino, who was from Texas originally and had been in USDA from the start of the Obama administration as one of the political consultants or political people in the administration helping. And he had served as the real utility service administrator for a period of time prior to his departure. And so he's been, started his own law firm and then had been connected with some of the larger electric co-ops down in the Texas area. And so John is on the transition team for USDA, and I would expect that he will surface again somewhere within the agency as well.
Brent is jumping back on. I just talked to him. I think his internet was probably not connecting as well. So he should be up in any second now. So sorry about that.
Okay, very good. It's very good. So I think, the transition, we'll talk to Brent about this as well, but the transition that occurs, of course, is most of the political appointees, will be gone on or before Inauguration Day, January 20th. I think noon on that day is the last potential time that they can be in place unless they're brought in to the new administration. There are usually a few of the appointees that stay on for some period of time with the new administration. I'm not so sure in this case that will be what will happen. And as Brent mentioned as well, that there's some career people that are on the transition team, and also that's not unusual either for some of the career people in the agencies to end up in political appointment positions in this administration. So what happens there is, of course, they, in most cases anyway, they lose their career status and they become a political appointee, which means they serve at the will of the administration, the president, and can be literally removed or whatever at any point in time, or at a minimum, if the White House changes into the future, then those appointments, obviously just like the current ones, their resignation is effective noon on January 20th at the latest. So as we head towards Inauguration Day, you'll see I would guess a number of those political people starting to vacate their position, move on, and you'll have career people in acting positions until the new wave of career, political appointees come in. And again, depending on how prepared the Biden administration is to start inserting people, usually, probably at the earliest, the middle of February, we start getting some political people in, and then March and April, and May are usually big times when people come in. So Brent, welcome back. Going through.
I think we could use broadband. I'm actually in rural America up in Maine, so I'm going to be advocating for some broadband.
So, well, during your dark period, I just talked about on the president-elect's website that they have their transition teams listed on there. And I talked about on the you already mentioned one person on the USDA one, and I also mentioned that former Rural Utility Service Administrator John Padalino, who came in early on in the Obama administration as a specialist from the political side, and then ended up being our U.S. administrator for a period of time. So he's on the transition team as well. Not surprised me that he would show up somewhere again. So I'll turn the microphone back over to you so you can pick up and carry on, and we'll.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, it's fun to spitball here and just speculate. So, it's interesting too, with such focus on climate, the Biden team is considering actually creating a new department, or, a new council at the White House to basically oversee all the rules and policies that will be implemented across the federal family. And some of the names that we've been seeing, that I've been hearing and seeing kicked around for the White House for that lead role would be Gina McCarthy, who some of you recall was EPA administrator in the Obama administration, who was very focused on climate. John Podesta, another prominent name. And then Governor Jay Inslee. I think it's fair to say that Governor Inslee is going to have some role in the administration, in some cabinet position at some point. But so it's it is an interesting time. I think the incoming team is a little bit frustrated. Usually by this time, the outgoing administration is coordinating and allowing folks to come in and begin, understanding, where who is on first and who's on second, and basically beginning to set up governance of a new administration. But obviously that has not happened. So whatever happens, I think we'll see kind of a delayed implementation of some of these, of the teams, of the landing teams being there. But in any event, I'd love to open it up and take any questions from the audience, and we can get into some policy issues if folks are interested in that.
So we have one question, Brent. So the question is, can you discuss what kind of chairmanship and leadership changes, and either, of course, the Senate's undecided at this point, but the House, specifically appropriations and authorizing committees. And I know with, of course, great interest with USDA that, my former state and representative was the head of the Ag Committee, Colin Peterson, lost.
That's right.
I think after 4 decades or something. So there's obviously going to be a change there, but
no, I think there's still a lot of shuffling going around there. I have been following the House a little less than the Senate. Obviously, in the Senate, Barrasso, who is the chairman of EPW, is considering. He still has a couple more years, but is considering stepping down and taking the chair of Energy ENC. And if he does, then Shelley Capito from West Virginia would be the chair of EPW, which is obviously a critically important committee for EPA. And so, I think we'll just, those committee assignments are still being kicked around. So I think DeFazio is obviously going to be an important player in House T&I committee. And so, he's obviously very interested in water infrastructure. And so I think ultimately this bodes well for utilities that obviously have interest and have needs for greater funding and resources to help them maintain their systems.
Yeah, I think my experience on the committees, that even though the chairmanships may change, that in a lot of cases the staff that work those committees kind of remain the same. I mean, there may be 1 or 2 changes at top, but in a lot of cases, if our members have relationships with staffs on those committees, a lot of times it's going to be the same people. They'll just have a new boss, and
that's exactly right.
So people that we work with will be the same ones. Another question came in, and you talked a little bit about your expectations for additional stimulus, and the question is will there be hearings, or is this going to be just a negotiated deal?
Well, I think what I'm hearing, there probably will be very few hearings. My expectation is that a lot of these negotiations have already taken place. A lot of these issues have been baked. The question is how big the stimulus is going to be, and I think that's the biggest question. I don't expect hearings anytime soon because it'll take a while, obviously, before I think a lot of these the committee makeup and I'm expecting, and what I hear is the administration would like to, within the first 30 days have a stimulus package that, and I think there's a lot of water groups right now that are trying to position themselves and talk to leadership on the Hill about the importance of water infrastructure. As we know, water infrastructure, in the infrastructure world, water is kind of the redheaded stepchild. And so is almost a lot of times the last thing to be considered. But I think we're fortunate because we do have a number of key water professionals that have the ear of the administration. As many of you know, Radhika Fox, the U.S. Water Alliance, who has obviously played a key role shaping some of the water policy for the transition team, and I know is working on a document right now that sets forth a number of very important policy considerations, both short-term funding to help a lot of the utilities survive the pandemic. But I think there's also a recognition that and a concern by some that too much free money is not always a good thing. A lot of these communities will gladly accept free funding and free money, but absent more and without some type of accountability and perhaps full cost pricing, or having these communities put into place different measures to make them make their system sustainable. There's some big concerns.
I'm gonna force you to make a plug for yourself with your is it Fuel Serve or Conserve or something?
Conserve fuel.
Yeah,
right.
So I apologize for not having the name correctly, but what you just mentioned about free not always being the answer to the problem is one of the recent articles that you have posted. Was on LinkedIn and then obviously on your site. So
right.
A lot of us on this side of the water industry absolutely agree with you that some of the specifically federal funding programs sometimes drive the problem rather than driving a solution. Right.
Well, Jim, thanks. I mean, Conserve America is a blog that I started about 10 years ago to try to bridge the divide, increasing partisan divide between Republicans and Democrats on environmental issues, and to see where we could focus on common ground. So as some may know, and as you know, we're in the process of launching the Water Finance Exchange, and this was co-founded by myself and Hank Habich. Hank was a former deputy administrator at EPA in the first Bush administration, and Usha Rao Manari, who's a water finance expert. And so we are working very closely with partnering with RCAP and RCAC, and I think I saw Nathan Ole in the audience. Nathan is on our board, also working closely with CoBank, and our hope is to establish a new platform, nonprofit platform that actually generates and accelerates a pipeline of water deals. As we know, many communities, either are not eligible for SRF funding or WIFIA or perhaps USDA and kind of fall through the crack. So we're really excited about partnering with our colleagues and trying to demonstrate that a mix of private and public funding and philanthropic funding can actually help catalyze some of these water deals that can help these communities then find the financing to upgrade their systems. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, another one of the questions that have come in, and it all bounces to you, even though it's specifically about what are ARWO's priorities for the new administration. And I think strategy for engagement is probably the question for you. Obviously COVID's had a huge impact on the election from a mail-in ballot standpoint, and obviously probably going to be a major impact on the transition team getting set up in DC.
It will.
From your perspective, I think enough about us that know our legislative priorities are focused on having a level playing field for regional systems and on partnerships and working with all their systems. So what would you recommend as a strategy with the current world as we know it with COVID?
Well, what I would say is you guys have already laid a great predicate for the partnerships and the regionalization. And what I would say is ARWO has definitely been oversized, plus sized in DC. And thanks to, the great work of you, Jim, and Bill Teichmiller and Randy and Eric and others. I mean, ARWO has a great reputation, and there's a lot of doors open to you all. What's really interesting with COVID, with many of us, I mean, we've been confined to their home offices and can't meet in person. We can't have that personal touch. But what I found is that a lot of agency personnel are much more open to Zoom calls or phone calls, and it's actually been easier at times to actually set up those meetings. So what I would really encourage you all to do, and I expect that you're probably doing this already, is find those influencers and those leaders that are have the transition team's ear, and begin sharing with them again your ideas. You all obviously are part of the ad hoc group, which is all the water groups, and your input has been extremely helpful on that. I do think that we're going to see a high priority on partnerships, and I think ARWO, the co-op model that you all have established and are using, is going to be very appealing to policymakers and to communities. So I think my expectation is ARWO is very well situated, and it's staying visible and staying relevant at a time when folks are not in DC, and it's actually a lot easier for those of us that kind of are in the rural areas to be as visible as those that are physically present in DC. And we're on the same playing field, we're on the same screen. So.
Right. Yeah. So. Another question we got, and this is, I think, a big one, is obviously we're under a continuing resolution budget-wise right now, I think through the end of December. So omnibus, more continuing resolutions. What's your perspective?
More continuing resolutions. It's my prediction through the end of this administration. So I don't see anything happening. So
let's see. Another question came in. Says, environmental justice, you mentioned earlier. So do you expect that, water affordability or, a water affordability program, what might be something that's coming down the tracks from the agencies?
Yeah, well, as many of your members know, the EPA has recently, put out a thought piece and is reevaluating affordability. That's AWWA and WEF had a lot of influence and impact on that EPA piece. It'll be interesting to see. I think there's going to be this real pull on the administration to provide more funding and free funding grant monies to a lot of distressed in EJ communities. The affordability, the direction the agency's headed right now on that, I think that I know it's been created with a lot of thought, but the concern is, by some that I've talked to, is that it actually could make things more difficult for communities. So the idea is to find a new mechanism by which communities, by EPA, determines whether or not regulations or are affordable, and so the calculus that they're using right now, I think the concern is that we're going to find out things are not affordable, so there's going to be a lot more grant money going to some of these communities without any accountability. So I think that's probably some of the concern that some of us have.
One of the discussions yesterday with the EPA and USDA, Andrew Sawyer and Edna Primrose, Andrew talked about the recent report that was released by the Environmental Finance Advisory Board.
Yep.
Regionalization, and they made some pretty I would say strong recommendations on how to potentially solve some of these issues. And one, of course, which Andrew talked about, how many states have already in place priorities for regionalization projects. And so I'm not sure something like the Environmental Finance Advisory Board going into a new administration will have a lot of pull, but you want to, as some of these, groups that are kind of on the periphery of the agencies and now going into a new administration,
right?
Will that stuff just get, and they'll generate new ones, or what's your?
Well, the good news with EFAB, for Environmental Finance Advisory Board, for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a FACA that's created to come up with address policy issues and concerns that the agency charges it with or comes up with. So in any event, they have been looking at this issue. The EFAB is one of the most important FACAs that EPA has. There's approximately 50 other FACAs, and this is an incredibly important one. And my couple of my colleagues, Jim Kelly and good friend Jim Proctor with McWayne, are on EFAB, and obviously are watching these issues and care about these issues very much. So this administration is going to listen to EFAB. So I think this is a good time. I've seen a number of thought papers and thought pieces by groups that are trying to influence the administration. And there's a lot of focus on partnering. There's a lot of focus on those communities right now that, have significant noncompliance. As we know, traditional enforcement does not work with those communities that have trailer parks or others. And so you've got to figure out a different way to address. So, we know that consolidation isn't a one size fits all. Sometimes consolidation doesn't work. Sometimes, consolidation can create more challenges. So there's going to have to be, every state's going to have to look at those situations and make an informed decision about how best to deal with those communities. And I mean, we may see, more focus on circuit riders and, Bill Semp's idea of more wholesaling, water wholesaling, where you have a community next door, whether it's a public or private community that has excess capacity, and can help those smaller communities that simply don't have the resources, the financial or operational resources to maintain their systems. So I do think that there's going to be some really painful but thoughtful discussions, on how much money goes out the door, free money to help these systems. Everybody wants these communities to survive and do well and economically have jobs. And but there's going to be some that sit back. Is that the right thing to do? Are there better and smarter ways to actually help those communities rather than give them perhaps grant money that in another 15, 20 years they're going to be needing more? Or can they rely upon a local community, a utility nearby to help support them and provide them the water and the resources, whether it's an interconnector or some other solution that short of building another $5 or $10 million wastewater or drinking water plant.
One more question that came in and talked about incoming administration. It at least seems in the media, for what that's worth, that there's a lot of pulling in a couple of different directions. You talked already about potential, cabinet appointees, and they're going to be more progressive or more centrist, and same issue on some of the policies that are being talked about that they're going to hit the ground running with. And so, do you perceive that at this point you can predict who's going to win out on the polling, the centrist or the?
Yeah, you know what? It comes down to Georgia. To be honest with you, it's going to be who is confirmable. Even if the Republicans lose the Senate, there's not always unanimity in any party. So I think you may have some folks like even, Senator Manchin, who may not go along with a radical, or more progressive candidate. So, but it really does, in my view, come down to who's confirmable. I mean, there's some really great names being bantied about for EPA and for other. Dan Esty, who was extremely thoughtful, was the chief, was the head of Connecticut's environmental department. He's at Yale now, and then you've got Colin O'Mara, a good friend, who's the CEO at the National Wildlife Federation. Was at the head of Delaware DNR for a number of years. Extremely thoughtful, and these folks are really focused on getting solutions and kind of reaching across. It doesn't, these candidates that I think have a good chance of getting in, either. Secretary level or undersecretary, or will have a big influence in shaping the policy. My hope is that we're going to see more of the centrist candidates. So,
all right, I know. I think I saw something either yesterday or today where some of the leadership on the House side, because some of those names are being thrown around as potential new administration folks too. And it looks like, their majority is going to be pretty small. So if they lose any number of Democrats, they'll have to be special elections. And, if you're approaching a midterm election, I think we all know what that usually means.
No, that's exactly right. And there's been even rumors that Senator Coons, would join the administration. And, that's so pulling from the House to the Senate would, a bit of a risky gamble. But I expect that we'll probably see some from the House join the administration. So,
yeah. Well, Brent, I don't know that I think I've got all the questions taken care of. If you have any final closing comments for ARWO and for the people that are online, we can do that. And then I think we'll wrap this up for today.
Yep. Well, Jim, I would applaud your efforts at ARWO. I think what you guys, the impact that you've had in Washington, D.C. on the thinking about regionalization and partnerships and co-ops has had an important impact upon the thinking of policymakers. And what I would encourage you to do and your members is just to continue to stay relevant and reaching out to those decision makers. And, it's not too early. Many of your members, know folks that are on the transition team or friends of those that are on the team, and continue just to in yourself continuing to put good ideas in front of them and let them know you'll be happy to support them, and, in any way that you can to advance smart policy solutions. So,
the session right before us was on lobbying and establishing relationships with the congressional delegations, and so they talked about this as well. But I don't know that you can't emphasize too much how important it is to get to know your legislators and their staff, and even the short time I've been in Colorado less than 10 years, and by getting to know some of those key staff, they're always looking for feedback on particular issues. And if they know that you're a regional water person, they're going to have your name on their Rolodex, and when they got questions or looking for some suggestions for policy, they're going to give you a call. So it's important that we get our names out, and that's each individual member to the congressional delegation, so that they know who you are, know who ARWO is, and the big picture that we want to push on, at least making regionalization a level playing field from a funding standpoint, and offering to help through partnerships or whatever it takes to help those small systems that continue to struggle with compliance with meeting the standards of drinking water, wastewater. So with that, thank you, sir. It's been great to see you.
Thank you, Joe. It's great to see you with you and great folks at ARWO. So wishing you all the best and looking forward to working with you in this next administration.
Very good, Brent. Stay safe.
Very good. Thank you, Joe.